Welcome to the Life You're Made For with me, Dr. Heather Penny. We're going to be having conversations that talk about us spiraling up versus spiraling down, because we all want to be living lives that are about thriving, not just surviving. This is the life you're made for. So let's get going. Hello, everyone. We are so glad to be back here with you because I have a very special guest today. Erica Dvorak, who is actually not only a colleague of mine, but now has become a great friend because we're both in the field as consultants and working. And so our paths cross, and we just always had a lot of fun exchanging ideas. And so I asked her to endorse my book, my latest book, Gray Space. And so she's just here both again as a colleague and as a friend. And I'd love to hear her talk a little bit about that. But welcome, Erica. It's just so good to have you.
Thank you, Heather. It's so good to see you. We spent a lot of time together before the book launch. And so It's just so fun to see your face now because it's been a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Erica specializes in marketing. And so I had brought her on and utilized her services to support me in launching a book. And she was just vital in that process. And then, of course, we became such great friends throughout the process. And she's not only supportive of Gray Space, but she lives it out. And I think that's something that I like. When I had all my endorsers, it was people that I knew was living out Gray Space because it's instinctive, but it's something that I think if we can all start committing to it and practicing it, we will grow as a community of kinder human beings. You know, we're joking about the shirt you have on. Tell everyone what the shirt you have on.
Yes. I'm going to make sure for the YouTubers that you can see it. I bought a sweatshirt that fits so well with it. It says, "Be a kind human." And I was wearing it today, actually at a coffee shop with my friend, and I was going to change into something a little more quote unquote appropriate for the podcast. And I was like, actually, this is perfect.
It's perfect.
Exactly what we're talking about today. So I kept it on in honor of what we're chatting about.
I love it. Well, before we jump into the conversation around Gray Space, tell our listeners a little bit of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So Erica Dvorak, and I am the founder and creative director of Faith and Gather. And I help Christian women just really live faith-inspired lives and help live out their faith in every area of their life. And so I have a podcast called the Faith Inspired Podcast. That's a weekly interview style podcast, which I have to say it's changing a little bit as businesses do. And so when you're hearing this, it might be more of like a community collaboration podcast. I don't know. God's got it in his hands. And so I'm letting it go to him, but it is a wonderful podcast that I love to share real life stories and talk about business, faith, and life, and just those God-sized dreams that people have and what life looks like as you're pursuing those dreams. And so it's been a really fun project that I've been working on for 3 years now. And then Faith and Gather, I have a Christian women community as well that's free to all to join and to be able to communicate and do life with one another and really build each other up as we're pursuing those God-sized dreams. And then just more things coming at you because I had a course called the Stress to Joy Transformation course, and now I am going to turn it into a free offering for women in a workbook instead.
Wow.
So in this really transition period of life, which is really, really exciting, because when I was looking at, just Gray Space and how to really apply those things, I'm like, man, with all the transition, emotions could be running high, and I could really be doing a poor job of creating these gray spaces in my life. But having this to hold on to has been super, super helpful as I'm just navigating transitions of personal and professional life.
Oh, I love that you said that and we used to talk about this a little bit too. I know when we were at the beginning of launching not only just this book, but this message and looking for partners in it. It's a way of thinking and living. And certainly you'll hear me say that's, as a leadership coach, it's the spaces we live and lead in. But I'm always loving hearing how people are utilizing Gray Space that instinctively is sitting inside of them. But it's also something that they're offering to the world and the spaces that they're living and lead in. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think specifically to me, Heather, before we jumped on, I shared a new life update with you that at the end of last year, we brought our children home. So I have a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and I became all of a sudden a part-time stay-at-home mom. So I work on Faith and Gather part-time and then part-time stay-at-home mom. And that at the beginning of this year has been a really hard transition. From day
Mm.
one of dating my husband, I told him I would never be a stay-at-home mom. And here I am now, a stay-at-home mom, still trying to pursue the dream that is on my heart, but also
Mm.
knowing that right now a big focus of my life is being a mom. And
Mhm.
there's some things with our children that I just need to make sure that I'm stewarding them
Mhm.
well. And so that's a big part of what I
Mhm.
do. And as I was thinking about our conversation and kind of like those spaces that I'm
Mm.
really in, I mean, I think every day we touch on each of the seven spaces, but like
Mhm.
really what comes up as a constant for me is the responding and
Mm.
reacting, because with
Mhm.
children, they just seem crazy. Like there's a whole lot of crazy that goes on
With a
in
lack of
my household.
self-awareness.
Yes, lack of self-awareness, there's high
Yeah.
emotions, we're
You're
doing
the
all
only
of
one that
these
knows they're
things.
crazy. They don't know
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, they don't know they're
They
crazy.
think they're a gift to the world.
Yes, yes. But I mean, with the responding and
Mhm.
reacting, you
Yeah.
so often as a parent can respond so quickly
Mhm.
instead of sitting there, or you can react so quickly instead
Mhm.
of sitting there
Mhm.
and having these questions of like, really, how should I respond? And,
Yeah.
you know, it's actually easy for me as like the bystander to see
Mhm.
it than
Mm.
to actually feel it when I'm doing it. So a lot of
Mhm.
times I'll see it or hear it when my husband is doing it, or my
Mhm.
mom, who also helps watch the children, is doing it.
Mm.
And like internally, my initial reaction is like, oh, no, 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 don't freak out at him. He actually wasn't doing that. He was doing
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. But when I am the person and it's just me and my child, I'm not
Yeah.
looking at those things. I'm not
Yeah.
assessing the
Mhm.
environment and what may be going on in his head with his emotions, or my daughter's
Mm.
emotions too. And so I think that for one is just taking that moment to pause
Mm.
and assess the situation. And like, instead of just immediately reacting and going from 0 to
Mm.
60, really taking a moment to think about, okay, should I ask him a question and try to understand where
Mm.
he's coming from and be on his level? Because he's 5 years old. He doesn't
Mhm.
have almost 40 years of
Yeah.
maturity and
Yes.
experience to like
Yeah.
think through things. And so I think that is something that we can apply, not only to parenting, but individuals that we connect with. So that's really one that has stuck out to me that I'm just
Mhm.
continually working on with them.
Mhm.
And also freedom and control.
Mm.
That is
It's huge.
one too, is like hands up in the air. I
Yeah.
surrender. There is
Yeah.
no, I've realized that I control nothing
Uh-huh.
except my attitude. It really is
Yeah.
just, how am I going to approach these things? And so that's another one
Mhm.
that I'm using in this parenting space
Yeah.
right now.
Well, and it's so funny you'd mention that because many leaders will go, yeah, the only one I had a little hard time understanding, Heather, was freedom and control. And 9 times out of 10, I'll say, well, are you a parent? And most of them are. And I'll say, what is it like when you're talking to your 13-year-old child or your 7-year-old or your 5-year-old? And I link it back to freedom and control in the parenting. And they all go, oh,
Eyes open.
yes, huge light bulb moment, paradigm shift. And it's like the same thing we're doing in the workplace, which is, are we trusting our employees? Are we trying to micromanage them or control them? Are we trusting the process? Are we trusting the ability for a collective clarity to come to the situation together? Are we trying to control it, which is usually going back to a sense of ego, right? I can't fail. It's on me. Can't look bad, or I can't disappoint my superiors, or whatever it is, which is the same thing we're doing in parenting. These children are a reflection of ourselves, and how they behave is a reflection of our parenting. And so therefore we can move into control because it's then connected to the ego. And I think that's something that I think, as you're talking about, that I love that. And I love hearing you apply it to the parenting space.
Yeah. And I think too, what I've realized recently is that a lot of, and this is with anything in life, not
Mm.
just parenting, but that is the house I am in right now,
Yes.
figuratively and
Uh-huh.
literally. And it just is this thought of, I can't control anything.
Mhm.
But when my emotions are high, it's
Mhm.
usually because what I want is not being met, or
Mhm.
whoever I'm communicating with or
Mm-hmm.
in a situation with is doing the opposite of my desired outcome. And
Mm,
just really thinking through that whole like, we talk about emotional intelligence, like
mm-hmm.
what, why am I
Mm-hmm.
having these emotions? How can I react? And I go back to this question of like, why do I actually feel this way? And it goes to
Mm,
what I want isn't happening, but do I
mm-hmm.
need what I want to have happen actually happen? And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it's like, no, just let it go,
Mm-hmm.
release the control, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll be okay. Like the fact that, my
Mm-hmm.
daughter is not sitting down right now and I want her to sit down, like
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. In
Mm-hmm.
this moment, she doesn't have to release the control. Let it
Yeah.
go.
Well, and I think what fuels that is really this sense. There's three things that I think about often when I work with people. It's curiosity, compassion, and connectedness. So as you're shifting away from ego and control and fear-based parenting, you're moving into, wait a minute, why is she standing up? Curiosity. She just needs to stand up. Duh. She's littler and her little body is telling her stand up, that curiosity, the compassion piece, which is, wait a minute, I don't want to be about control. I really want to make sure that I'm understanding what's happening here and offering her this empathy, going back to EQ. And then this idea of connectedness. I am more concerned about connecting with my daughter instead of controlling my daughter. So when we talk about these 7 practices, it's these 3 different energies, I think, that flow out of us that will help fuel a natural gravitation to start practicing these 7 areas of grace space.
Yeah, and that connectedness, like that
Mm-hmm.
is that I think is where you and I
Yeah.
connected is on
Yeah.
like how we want to connect each other and just have that
Yeah.
humanness towards each other. And just know as I was prepping for this podcast, I was listening to the one that where you talked about grace space, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
practical like overview of it. And the story that
Mm-hmm.
you had told was about going to war. And I can't remember if it was World
Oh,
War
right.
One, World War
World War
Two,
One.
and where
Mm-hmm.
yeah, where they ended up, each side ended up kind of just having a truce for the day and
Yeah.
giving each other gifts. And then at the end of that, they couldn't resume the
Yeah.
war because they knew
Yeah.
each other. They had connected with each other and had that human connection and
Mm-hmm.
understood that the other person was valuable and there was value
Mm-hmm.
in that other being. And I just
Mm-hmm.
like that for me was like, whoa. It was
Yeah.
just like a light bulb went out, it went
Yeah.
off, and it was like
Yeah.
this heaviness of like, wow, like that is the reality of life. And that's what this grace
Mm-hmm.
space method is like all about is that we
Mm-hmm.
just have to realize that we are each humans and we each
Mm-hmm.
come with value and like how do we actually connect with one another and be able
Mm-hmm.
to see each other for
Mm-hmm.
who we are, even if I think especially in today's world there is so
Mm-hmm.
much on like the political climate and all these differing
Mm-hmm.
views. I'm a woman of faith, and so a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
people views of the world come up against with things that I believe, and just being
Mm-hmm.
able to connect with other people and just say
Yeah.
like, I'm a human, you're a human. We may not have the same ideas and belief system or whatever it is, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to connect with you because I care about you and I want to get to know you on a deeper level than a surface level. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think grace space really allows us to go through that
Mm-hmm.
process and really have it. So when we are, you had
Mm-hmm.
said, throwing each other gifts instead of grenades. And I
Yes.
was like, yes, that is
Yeah.
so incredibly beautiful. So, like, how can we
Mm-hmm.
throw gifts instead
Mm-hmm.
of grenades at each other?
Yeah, and for those of you that haven't read the book yet, I opened the book up with this scenario of World War One, where the French and the Allies are on one side, and the English, and then the Germans on the other side, and it's right nearing Christmas, and one soldier just started lighting a Christmas tree, and then a couple days before Christmas, and then it moved into the actual day of Christmas. They're out in the middle of the field exchanging gifts and singing Silent Night, and I always wondered, who is that one person who started recognizing there's a connection here? And then I go, if they can figure that out on a battlefield where they are trained to literally kill their opponents, how much more can we figure that out in today's world? And in the political arena, the theological arena, the professional arena, the parenting arena, all these places where we're starting to lob grenades back and forth at each other. when in reality, we can remember that we're all connected here. So someone just was some soldier, God bless him. He was like, I'm over this. It's
I know, and he
Christmas and we all want to be home. I'm just going to start singing Silent Night. I'm going to start throwing gifts over.
Yeah, yeah, and you said started it with like that, just the Christmas tree was up, and maybe he
Yeah.
wasn't even thinking about the fact for the other people. He was
Yeah.
just doing something, putting up a Christmas tree that
Right.
his team really resonated
Yeah.
with, when the other team probably saw it and thought, "Oh,
Yeah.
like that I can resonate with that too." And
Right.
so just like, I mean, it might have been a totally unintentional
Yes.
uniting at
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
but the fact that like they saw the Christmas tree and were like, "Oh, you're like me," that
Yeah.
takes everything kind of, off the table. And it's like, okay, let's just start over again and
Exactly.
figure this thing out.
Yeah. To the point where, they had to, on December 26th, they had to bring in fresh troops because they refused to shoot at each other. They
Yeah,
started shooting over each other's head.
which duh, when I had read that and you had said that, I was like, of course, like
Yeah.
there's no way I could have ever done that. After
Yeah.
you meet somebody, it's like, I think about a lot of times if you are so true honesty, I have a little bit like of a lead foot on when I'm driving. And like it's just
Yeah, I hear you.
I tell people, and I feel bad even saying it, but
Yes.
sometimes I lose my Jesus behind the wheel because like I get in the car and I'm like, I gotta get to my place, like
Uh-huh.
get out of the way. And like I
Mm.
get upset at the people in front of me. Well,
Yeah.
I've always thought like, well, what if I was super upset at somebody
Yeah.
driving on the road and then we pulled into a gas station together and they get out and it's like my best friend, or
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
somebody that you automatically start a conversation with and connect
Yeah.
with. You're no longer mad at them for what they were
Yes.
doing on the road and them driving, 30 and a 60 or whatever it is. You're
Right.
like, oh, and then the next time that would happen again, you'd just be like, oh, well, Sally, there she is again, driving
Yeah.
30 and a 60. Like, instead of me saying a few words behind the wheel and trying
Yes.
to, move around.
Yeah, and what I've found with people is that once they begin to understand they have that split second to make a choice, most people are choosing a better choice. It's
Mhm.
just we're not taking that minute to say, wait a minute, I can react to this driver who just cut me off. And frankly, I have the right to. Or I can respond and either wave or just ignore them or just let them come through or, adjust my attitude and say, well, I'm sure I've cut people off. Just offer grace. I mean, that's just a little small example, but we're living in a world that's so reactive
Mhm.
that we have this fear base, and one of them is this fear versus trust is one of the practices, but we have this fear that's motivating us, not a sense of connection or compassion, or I remember trying to get to the hospital when I was having my baby, and I know we were not safe drivers. I swear I wanted to put a sign in the window going, we are on a very important mission. Please have grace on us. I remember that when my kids were driving, going, I'm sure we are not driving well. Please be kind. This is a student driver behind the wheel. And those are just examples of thinking about we don't have any clue of what people are going through.
Mhm.
And if we treated them like, again, with compassion, oh, maybe they're having a rough day, or their dad just died, or they're trying to get to the hospital, or they're scared because they realize they left their kid at school. I mean, the myriad of things of what can make us anxious behind the wheel. And that's just one example. But most of us don't drive with just the sense of space, grace, a grace space around us. We drive more of this sense of, well, it's survival of the fittest out here, and I can't be victimized. And by the way, my agenda is more important than your agenda. So I love that you brought up just the simple act of driving because it's holding us accountable. That like, oh, it's really nice to talk about in these big areas of the corporate workplace and our parenting, and we know how to be a better human in all these spaces because they're watching us. But what's secretly happening to you when you're getting behind the wheel of a car?
Totally. Totally. Like people see Erica, who really is like my true
Yeah,
Erica in the everyday.
yeah,
But why is it when I get behind the wheel that I turn into somebody else where I'm continually having to
yeah,
apologize to God for like what I'm saying? I'm
yeah,
like, I'm sorry. I'm
yes,
sorry. Like, please forgive me. Like, I
yes,
didn't mean to think those things, say those things. And it's because I think is for me personally, I am faced with those things constantly
Yeah.
and not having control of who's in front of me and when I'm going to get there and all those things. I'm dealing with all these issues that are
Yeah.
within gray space on the road
Yeah.
of different personality types and people and how they like
Yeah.
to drive and, that don't fit with what I want and communication style, even though we're not
Yeah.
really communicating, but like the way you
Yeah.
drive and the way you allow
Yeah.
me to get in the other lane or
Yeah.
not, like that's communicating a lot to me. And so,
Right.
coming up with these biases of people
Yeah.
based on like their driving or their car
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And then the reality of, going back to just be curious and just give
Mm-hmm.
them some grace,
Right.
And so it's just, I think, a good analogy of
Yeah.
life and what that is. And
Oh, yeah.
you brought up the fear piece. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's one where it's just thinking about our world right now and just how
Mm-hmm.
defensive we
Yeah.
all are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the world tells us right now that we have to stay true to who we are and this is our
Mm-hmm.
truth. And we've
Mm-hmm.
become so ingrained in
Mm-hmm.
becoming, like you say, siloed. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I picture like a rock or something just so stiff that it's just
Mm-hmm.
like you can't penetrate it because this is who I am. And if you tell me anything
Mm-hmm.
different, then that's going to offend me or intrude on who I am. And that's not it. I mean, you mention it all the time that,
Mm-hmm.
you have your own beliefs, but you are so open to hearing, and this is
Mm-hmm.
not even faith related, just beliefs of
Mm-hmm.
life and could be values, morals, it could just be your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on a project, whatever it is, but like
Mm-hmm.
you have your own stance on something.
Mm-hmm.
And to be open to that, because
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has an objective thought, that's not going to get anybody anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have that connection. We're not going to be able to build that bridge. We're
Mm-hmm.
just constantly going to stay in these silos because we're so
Mm-hmm.
fearful of what other people believe and think because we've been so
Mm-hmm.
wired to be all like
Mm-hmm.
true to our identity, which is fine. We can
Mm-hmm.
remain true to our identity. I don't have to change my
Mm-hmm.
identity and who I am and what I believe because you
Mm-hmm.
believe something different. But it doesn't mean that I have to sit here with a shield and
Mm-hmm.
believe that you're darting arrows at me when I just want to be open and curious about who you are,
Mm-hmm.
why you believe what you believe, and how can we work together as
Mm-hmm.
humans and have that connection and respect one another and really
Mm-hmm.
have that common ground so we can do good for whatever that is, if that is in the workplace, if that is in
Mm-hmm.
the home, if that is in the grocery line, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
and if
Mm-hmm.
that is on the road with tires
Mm-hmm.
beneath
Yes.
us, like
Yeah.
whatever that is, how we
Mm-hmm.
can remain connected as a human race.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this. And it honestly is bringing up a scenario that happened to me years ago, but I'll never forget it. I was driving on the road. Sorry, you've got me on this whole road thing because you realize how you're right. If we could practice those seven gray spaces practices in the car and on the road, what a different community our world would be. But I remember this guy cut me off and it was dangerous and he almost caused an accident. And it wasn't like I was angry, but I was like, dude, I gotta let you know. So I just tapped my horn going, you about caused an accident. And around, you just went, right over four lanes. People were braking, cars were swerving, and you didn't realize what you're doing. And then you landed right in front of me. And I was like, I'm going to let you know I wasn't so happy about that. Drive better, buddy, be better. So here we are. Like, it's not this rage thing, but it is a justice thing. And that was about the end of it. I felt fine about how I responded to it. However, he got out of the car. He turned around to me and started bowing and waving his hand like he was just severely sorry and apologizing to me. I'll never forget that. And I just, all of a sudden, you talk about compassion, it just poured over me. And I just waved and smiled at him and realized he had made a very bad mistake in his driving and he was trying to repair it and make it right. Fortunately, we were at a stoplight. I'm like, just get back in the car, man. You're making me nervous. You're totally forgiven. But I was so impressed with his owning of the behavior
Mm.
that even in the wrong, he chose to respond with so much integrity that all it did is made me want to go hug him. Like, oh, we've all had bad
Mm.
days. We've all missed that turn off. And of course, I'm from LA. So I'm like, he's getting out of the car. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting ready to lock all my doors. I don't know what's coming at me. Right. And to watch him offer me this this space of grace, which included just a really powerful response of apologizing. To me, that really stuck with me. And it
Mhm.
reminded me that, the other side of creating grace space is choosing to respond well when we have blown it.
Mm.
We don't just ignore it. We do repair. We make sure that we acknowledge it. And how that ripple effect, I don't know how it affected the other drivers. It affected all of them, the four lanes, but it affected me. And I'm assuming it probably did a ripple effect where it created some empathy. You'd have to be pretty hard hearted to just keep being mad at the poor guy. He realized he'd blown it and he was trying to make it repairs with us in the middle of this road. And I was so impressed with his response to that, I never forgot that. And that was a reminder to me that, again, when we've done wrong, part of that is fully owning that. That's also a way that we cultivate grace space around us.
Mhm. Yeah, apologies and forgiveness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
And
to
that goes back to that connectedness, right? We're all
Yeah.
looking for connectedness, but sometimes in order to be connected, you got to hear an apology. You got to hear a repair. You got to hear that you done me wrong, man.
Yes, yes, seriously, and I was thinking so back to the driving, gosh,
Yeah.
we're on this analogy, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of times. So I just was in another country and the
Yeah.
driving is just so different there. You were
Yeah.
too. And so I'm sure you
Yeah.
experienced it. And what is appropriate in one country is not
Hmm.
appropriate in
Right.
another. And I think just with driving, you can be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, that person is driving
Yeah.
crazy, just like erratic driving. And in all reality, they may be new to driving in
Yeah.
America in our case, and that's
Yeah.
totally normal in the country
Right.
that they're from.
Yeah.
And not having that sense of like curiosity
Yeah.
and allowing them to, kind of figure out something new, giving grace
Yeah.
space for people to figure out the rhythm of the new
Hmm.
culture, whether that's in a workplace or a real,
Hmm.
societal culture, trying to figure that out. And so and allowing them the having that apology and having
Hmm.
that forgiveness and we should just allow grace in general for those situations. But I
Yeah.
think like sometimes in life it takes a while for us to figure things out. And
Yeah.
once we figure things out, whatever that is,
Hmm.
and we own up and apologize to it, being able to forgive somebody for what they had done in the past, not
Hmm.
like unknowingly
Hmm.
knowing that like what they were
Hmm.
doing may have been wrong or just didn't fit with
Yeah. Yeah.
with that culture.
Yeah. I love that. And even you mentioned earlier, I guess switching gears a little bit, I'm thinking about when we are transitioning and changing in life, how important grace is a part of that. And you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier that you were in a significant place of transition. I mean, you came from a Fortune 500 company, working with them, starting your
Yep.
own business, declaring you would never have kids. And now you're home trying to navigate. It sounds like both full-time parent and your company. I mean, is this a little bit of
Yeah.
the space you find yourself in?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So 100%. My
Yeah.
background is in corporate America. And so
Yeah.
5 years ago, I was in corporate America working 60 plus hours a week, high stress job. And I decided to jump from that and had a part time position, which was wonderful. And then I was called to do Faith and Gather full time.
Mhm.
And then just navigating all of that. And then because I own my own business, it's easier to be flexible. And so when
Mhm.
it came apparent to us that we needed to bring our kids home at the end of the last year, it was like, okay, well, I'll be able to figure this
Mhm.
out. I'll work earlier
Mhm.
mornings and work maybe at nights, and we'll just figure out my days. And so we've been able to do that. But there's been a lot of
Mm.
transition in my life. And I had actually at the beginning of the new year started my Christian entrepreneur community for Faith and Gather. And I had to put it
Mm.
on pause after the third month because it was just too much
Mm.
navigating being a stay-at-home mom. And also, we realized that it didn't fit the lifestyle that I was creating, nor did it fit where I felt like my skills should be and where I want to
Mhm.
take the company. And
Mhm.
so I had to go to the members. There was about 20 women already a part of this community and just ask for their grace and
Mm.
ask for their forgiveness and their patience and me trying to figure out this whole
Mm.
new life thing.
Mhm.
And that took for me talk about like humility and like
Mm-hmm.
really going to them and
Yeah.
saying like, hey, I'm just trying to figure this out. And the whole community wrapped their arms around me and was like, absolutely,
Of course.
Erica, do what you need to do. Like
Yeah.
that was a community I was building where people like that. So I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that that
Mm-hmm.
was the response that I received. But had
Mm-hmm.
they not had grace towards me in that transition, that would have made it really hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
already hard enough, quote unquote, sacrificing things that I
Mm-hmm.
want to do right now in life just so that I can step up in a different role of my
Mm-hmm.
life. But being able to have that support was
Mm-hmm.
incredibly valuable for me
Mm-hmm.
in that time and actually gave me the encouragement I needed and that
Mm-hmm.
confidence that I needed to continue to do what I felt was right in my heart for
Mm-hmm.
my family,
Mm-hmm.
myself, and just professionally for the
Mm-hmm.
business moving forward. And so now with that transition, I've just made it a free community and I'm refunding the women who had become founders
Mm-hmm.
of the community and just moving forward with that. But to have that grace gave me just so much peace
Mm-hmm.
and just yeah, confidence to move forward. So yeah, transitions for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's been my past 5 years have been one
Mm-hmm.
transition after next. But I would say this has been
Mm-hmm.
the biggest one of just laying things down and
Mm.
going where I'm being called.
Well, it's so powerful. I'm glad you mentioned that, especially for everyone out there starting their own companies or owning their own companies and the entrepreneurs that are listening to the space. Man, the twists and turns that come at us.
Mm.
And I think you and I are a little similar that we are high achievers. So I think once in a while we might overreach, huh, Erica?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds about right.
And then learning how to own that. And again, I'm learning the gift. Most people say it's okay. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to hear us own it. It reminds me of the guy getting out of his car and just bowing to me. And you could see just non-verbally asking for an apology. Are you kidding? I freely gave it. And I think that's what people naturally love doing.
Mm-hmm.
We then we have a hard time giving it to ourselves. But boy, when they give it to us, it makes us go, you're right. I can let myself off the hook. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to not get it the first time. I'm allowed to have a learning curve. I mean, there's things I have to tell myself in order to go and own it appropriately and not just power through and destroy and probably make the lives miserable of anyone we live with because we are determined to keep our word. We're not
Yes.
offering grace to ourselves, which again, that ripple effect going out, we think we're only doing it to ourselves. We're harming everyone. And even ultimately your members, there would probably be they'd pick up on it, either a subtle intensity or anxiety or even resentment, growing resentment. I mean, people pick up on that when we're not authentically able to give freely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to giving grace to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves first. If we
Yeah.
don't have that, and I think that that's something that we're learning every
Yeah.
time that I go through an experience or situation, just like with the community, that reminds me next time,
Mm-hmm.
because there will be a next time when you get
Yeah.
yourself into a bind and
Yes.
need to give yourself grace or
Yeah.
whatever it is in life, because we're human and we fail and we do things and take
Mm-hmm.
risks and all of that to remind myself, like, Erica, just take a moment, take a breath, give yourself grace, and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of have that sense of humility. And just,
Mm-hmm.
I think not everybody's going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, in this world, not everyone's going to understand grace space and the principles, the different practices
Mm-hmm.
of it. But we can find our community that does, and we can wrap
Mm-hmm.
ourselves around that community and keep going back to it. And if you are a leader, like, you create that culture and you create that
Mm-hmm.
environment that becomes, I think, very contagious. But I think at the core of us,
Mm-hmm.
most people would rally around great
Mm-hmm.
space. We do want to help each other when it
Mm-hmm.
is in times of need. People just, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what you believe. If somebody needs something and they don't even know you, if there was a
Mm-hmm.
car accident, you got hit by a car, people would run to help
Mm-hmm.
you and they could care less about anything about you. Just
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you are a human and they are a
Mm-hmm.
human and they want to help you. And that's it. And so having just this
Mm-hmm.
grace to support each other in a community is incredible.
Right. We forget that everybody is dealing with some sort of crisis or has dealt with it or some even brokenheartedness. We just
Mhm.
forget life is so hard on humans. And
Mhm.
we forget that. And I think if we treated everyone with they're dealing with either a broken heart or crisis or trauma or sadness or just today was just difficult. I mean, how much kinder we would be to one another if we started
Mhm.
remembering that we all are dealing with something in our life, no matter how big or small, we're dealing with something or we're dealing with getting over something.
Yeah. Yeah, I just actually did, a talk with a group of women about how to find hope in pain and suffering, and
Mm,
part of what I was talking about, and it just resonated, everyone that came up with me was like, "We all have pain and suffering. We all
yeah.
do. Not
Yep.
one of us escapes this life
Mm-hmm.
without some kind of pain. Some may have less than others, but we all experience it
Mm-hmm.
physically, emotionally, whatever that may be for you, but we
Mm-hmm.
all experience it. And to know that, I think what's beautiful, again, you and I went to just different countries around the same
Yeah.
time. But when
Mm-hmm.
you go and you travel around the world, even if you
Yeah.
can't speak the same language, you
Mm-hmm.
start to see that we all have the same emotions. We
Yeah.
all have a need to want to be a part of a community and have family and have
Mm-hmm.
friends. And we all need the same things, clothing and food and water and, all of these things. Even though we can't communicate, you can still relate. I mean, I had the opportunity to actually, so you can't
Mm-hmm.
communicate language wise, but I had the opportunity to be next to people who couldn't communicate with me, but we
Mm-hmm.
actually communicated very well without words and were
Yeah.
able to connect with each other. And it reminds me of a
Mm-hmm.
time actually when I was in Paris once and we were going up one of
Mm-hmm.
the domes and on the stairs, and there was a woman in
Mm.
front of me, and I can't remember, I think she was Asian, and so we couldn't connect, but she looked at me with this fear in her eyes of heights, and we just like
Mm.
kind of looked at each other and held
Yeah.
each other's hand and
Oh,
like just like,
sweet.
and we
Yeah.
connected. We had
Yeah.
that moment, yet we
Yeah.
said nothing to each
Yeah.
other,
Nothing.
but we
Yeah.
had that
Yeah.
emotional connection there. And so just to, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
remember that we're all going through something. We all have the
Mm-hmm.
same emotions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's take down those walls. Let's break down
Mm-hmm.
those silos. Let's just remember that, like, we can, no matter how much our differences are, there's
Mm-hmm.
always something that unites us. And that is the fact that we're humans. And so we can start on that level and that
Mm-hmm.
foundation and find, I mean, honestly, I challenge
Mm-hmm.
anyone not to find five things in common with each person
Oh
that they
yeah.
meet. There's got to be,
I love
hundreds
yeah.
that we just don't even think about. But on
Mm-hmm.
that human level, we can connect. And so that is a great bed for how to
Mm-hmm.
have grace.
Oh, I love that. I used to teach a course in communication, and one of the facts that stuck out with me even years later was 90% of our communication is nonverbal.
Mm,
90%. When they started researching that, but I found that rather encouraging because it just reminded us that all of humanity, we don't need to have the barriers that we think that are barriers. And it reminded me, you're right. You were in Paris, I was in Italy, and I was sitting at a table, and this is even more benign. It wasn't even a human emotion of fear, but I asked the waiter for olive oil and balsamic vinegar for my bread. You got to have that when you're in Italy. So I was
yes.
like, I got to be dipping it all. Well, the waiter saw that there was one on a table next to us. He just went and picked it up, but he was a little sneaky. He did a lap around the restaurant and then came back and put it on my table because he knew it'd feel awkward to just pick it up and then put it on the table next to me, except that we all knew it and saw it. So here's this table next to me who doesn't speak English. And then all of a sudden I saw them getting mad. Like he just took our olive oil and vinegar and just gave it to them next to them. And I could see that they were talking in a different language of like, what the heck, man? That was our oil, olive oil and vinegar. And so I
That's
just
funny.
started laughing and I looked at them and I scooted it all the way over the edge. And I was like, we can share, don't worry. And then they went from anger and frustration at this waiter to just started laughing, going, thanks so much. You know? And we spoke no language, but it began a funny little joke between us throughout the dinner. Then as we get up, they were trying to talk to us in, of course, I'm lame in Italian and French, so I was no help and found myself resisting the urge to slip into Spanish because that was the only thing I am bilingual in. Bilingual. I can do a little bit of Spanish in it. So it was just such a funny conversation. And toward the end, he just put his hand on my shoulder and just kept patting me and then he
Mm,
walked off. And I just thought, what a funny little exchange over a funny little thing of oil and
mhm,
vinegar. And
mhm.
yet it felt respectful. It felt humane and going after like no, I'm just going to choose connectedness with them because that wasn't fair.
Yeah.
They just got it ripped off their table, put on my table. And I wanted them to know I saw that and I cared. And don't worry, we'll share. It wasn't a survival of the fittest of who gets to have the oil and vinegar on their table for the restaurant and me going, ha, 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 I got it. You did it. The opposite of gray space. So just little things like that when we're looking for it and when it's hitting me, even just writing this book. And you know me, I write all my books for me because it's how I'm trying to work through life. So I practice these practices many years
Yeah.
before the book even came out. So I've been very conscious of what does gray space look like, whether we're in a car or in the corporate space or as a parent or
A
at a
restaurant.
restaurant in Italy, sharing my oil and vinegar. And I think just living with that question of how do I carry my gray space around with me? How do
Mhm.
I offer gifts, not grenades?
Mhm.
How am I just living out gray space? And you'd be surprised, listeners. And to Erica's point, I want to challenge you as well. Find it. Find 5 people that you can connect with. They are out there. And when I started thinking more that way, it wasn't the dramatic spaces. It was these little small spaces, like at restaurants. My barista, just looking at a waiter or waitress, I can't even tell you how many times they have thanked me at the end of the meal. And
Mhm.
mind you, it's before the tip. So they don't even know what tip is coming or not. And they have thanked me for thank you for I just got thanked last night. Thank you for being such a positive experience for me as a waiter.
Hmm.
Thank you for coming in tonight. Like I can tell they genuinely appreciate it because I'm conscious of carrying that gray space around with me, trying to say, I choose to see you as a connection point here.
Hmm.
And it could be just a smile. It doesn't even have to be a long conversation. I want to make sure people don't feel this pressure to spend time with all these people. And we're not talking about that at all. It's just every human that crosses your path. How are you offering them grace space?
Yeah. Yeah, and that reminds me actually, so 2 days ago we went to a restaurant and just the thought of when you were talking, it was your actions affect
Mhm.
others, and then they
Yeah.
affect others, and then they
Yeah.
affect others,
Yeah.
and then they affect others. Like it just doesn't stop between you and the other person. It
Yeah.
then will have this ripple effect. So when it comes to
Right.
like a restaurant, we went to this restaurant. They have the best burgers in town, best burgers and french fries. Like they are known for it. They always win all the awards. And usually you have your burger within like 10 minutes. So you know
Yeah.
it's like with 2 young children, like this
Yeah.
is like it's an automatic go for me because I know
Yeah.
I'm gonna have great food and I know we can be in and out in like 20 minutes without tantrums. Like this is
Yeah.
this is the holy grail of a moment for a mom. And we ended up getting our food like 45 minutes later after we
Oh
had
my word.
ordered it. And my daughter had to get out of her high chair and I had to walk around with her.
Yeah.
And I was honestly internally upset. I was like,
Yeah.
seriously, like this is becoming an issue. We might even have to
Yeah.
leave because I don't know if she's going to be able to make it any
Yeah.
longer. And I'm hungry and I'm getting cranky and
Yeah.
hangry. And finally, the waitress came over and she said, "You guys, I'm so sorry. We had new hires in the kitchen and they're just, trying to ramp up and figure things
Yeah.
out. And this happened last weekend too. And, thank you so much for your patience." And, once I understood where she
Yeah.
came from,
Yeah.
then I was like, okay, totally. So then, I made sure that we were the table that was saying, thank you so much. We
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you. Like,
Yeah.
gave her the same amount of tip that she would have received
Yeah.
without that issue. And just making sure that we didn't become kind of a thorn in her side for the rest of the
Yeah.
night, which would then affect all the other tables. But
Yeah.
I think also for her point, when we are having issues,
Yeah.
making sure to have that communication open with other people too, because we can't
Mm-hmm.
have grace space if you're not actually communicating with the other person as
Yes.
well. So it's not only us initiating so we can understand other people, but also initiating the
Mm-hmm.
conversation so they can understand you. Because
Yeah.
once she opened that up, I at first was kind of like, okay, well, she
Yeah.
hasn't come and greeted us. She hasn't told us anything. Like, what is the
Yeah.
issue? Once she
Yeah.
told me, it was gone. All of that
Yeah.
anxiety and that frustration was gone. And now I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I create this space of grace for her and others
Yeah.
within this restaurant that I love and adore.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that because I bring that up in the book about that case study where they put that guy in the middle of an airport and they started tapping his toe and acting impatient. And within minutes, the majority of everyone else around him was starting to act impatient. And it was just a research project. And there was the minority were just ignoring him, but the majority started acting impatient too. And there was nothing to be impatient about. It
Yeah.
was just his nonverbal cues was starting to ripple across everyone in that room. And the researchers watched within 10 minutes, the majority of the room was really sending off all these signals and nonverbal communication cues that they were very impatient.
Mm.
And nothing was happening. The play wasn't even late, but
Yeah.
it was just nonverbal cues. So I think that is just powerful to be able to
Mhm.
recognize your power. And I thought, wow, I want to make sure that part of my grace space, as I carry it around with me, and I don't do this really well all the time, but I'm trying to be conscious of it, is what nonverbal cues am I sending off?
Mm.
Is there, am I, my body posture showing an ease and a relaxation, a trust that all will be well? My time will come, my turn in line is going to come, all this stuff that allows people to start relaxing. Or am I starting to send off nonverbal cues that I'm getting bored? I don't like this. I want to be in a different place. Why can't they do things faster? They should have this more organized. These are all things I tend to think when I'm having to force to wait. What is wrong with this system and how can I help them improve it?
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's one thing to think it, another thing to act it.
Yes.
Again, going back, we're
Yeah.
human. We're going to be thinking these things.
Yeah.
It's just another thing to take that pause and actually act on it. And
Right.
yeah, just man, we affect the size, the eye
Yeah.
rolls, the whatever it is
Yeah.
of body language that is
Yeah.
very infectious. And it's easy to roll off your back if it's just done a couple times. But like you
Mm-hmm.
said, he was in the room at an airport for
Yeah.
10 minutes. If you're
Yeah.
constantly getting that for 10 minutes, then you're going
Yeah.
to start to feel agitated too. And you're going to start, it's contagious.
It's
Your attitudes
contagious.
are contagious. And so let's just
Mm-hmm.
watch out for those, just like those little viruses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And you don't want to be patient zero where you're the one starting it all, huh?
Yes, exactly.
You had mentioned that grace space starts with yourself. And I love that you recognize that, because to be authentic leaders in any place that we're living and leading in, we cannot authentically show up unless we've done our own work and have our own self-awareness. As you looked at those 7 practices, and I love that you highlighted this is not about perfection, and I always say this all the time. That's why I call them practices. It's something we're always practicing, but it's not something we will always perfect. It's just remembering that this is something we get to continuously be mindful of. But as you look at those 7, which is one that really stood out to you that you realized it was a challenge to offer to yourself?
Oh man. Wow. I think any of them,
Mhm.
depending on the day,
Yeah.
honestly. I think we all go through that.
Mhm.
A lot of us have these exteriors that seem
Mhm.
very confident, but
Mhm.
inside, I think we all have a little bit of that imposter syndrome or
Mhm.
just a little bit of questioning of our value and our worth and,
Mhm.
all of that. And so I think at any given time, I could really be doing any of these
Mm.
to myself. I think for me, it would probably be destructive communication that I
Mm.
need to work on. I think
Mhm.
I am my worst critic. I am very
Mhm.
much, like you had said, an overachiever, type
Mhm.
A. Excellence is my bar. And
Mm.
even beyond excellence is my bar. I had
Mhm.
someone say this to me once. It was a coach that I was working with, and she was like, Erica, your 100% is somebody else's 120, 150%. So if you
Mm.
just lower the bar to like 70%, you're good.
You're
And
good.
that was really, that was
That's
like
great.
really hard for
Yeah.
me to take because
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Not 100%?
Yeah.
That just, I can't do that. It doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
But really, like, I'm operating at 150% level. So I can lower
Mm.
the bar to
Mhm.
70% there and just be okay with that. And so
Mhm.
I have to deal a lot with the destructive
Mhm.
communication and really um, talking myself off a ledge and
Mhm.
empowering myself, which is funny because that's what I do for a living is
Yeah.
I empower other women with their
Yeah.
lives and really, make them believe that they can achieve that big
Mhm.
dream that they
Mhm.
have. But I think a lot of times, those that can't do teach. And so I
Yeah.
do that a
Yeah.
lot. And I'm like, okay, I want to give them the encouragement I can't always give myself. And so that's something that I am working on continuously and giving myself grace. So, I am
Mm-hmm.
constantly, I will have those communicate like discussions in my head. I will say something to
Mm-hmm.
myself and I will take a pause and I'll say, no, that is
Mm-hmm.
not what we're going to be thinking right now. We're going to change that thought and I'm going to like give you a compliment, so to speak, or like turn
Mm-hmm.
that around. Like, you when it comes to the case of my children, it's like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
yelled at my child. You're a
Mm-hmm.
bad mom. You should have done better. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you are just a mom who is having a hard day right now.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lack of sleep. You need some food. Just take a breath and you can
Mm-hmm.
have a do-over. You are a great
Yeah.
mom who loves their children. And so just having that communication, same thing as a business owner, as an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, man, like that I think has been the hardest road is just those thoughts that come after you of, you could do better, you could be better. Look at that other person who has,
Mm-hmm.
achieved this with their business. Why can't you
Mm-hmm.
do that? I'm not cut out for this. All those kind of thoughts. And then
Mm-hmm.
being able to combat that with those actual positive thoughts and giving yourself grace of like, no, you have a different road.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your road? You will achieve what you need to achieve when you need to achieve it. And so just continuing to have those positive spins and conversations in my own head. It's real fun in
Mm-hmm.
here, Heather.
Yeah. It's a party.
It's a party.
Well, then I got to say, I'm super proud of you because of what you did when you came to your community and said, oops, I'm sorry. I've got to do a U-turn here. This isn't going to
Mm,
work. That is a real grace space you offered yourself. And really the constructive language is what you needed in order
mhm.
to be able to say what you need to say, but offer that to yourself. And if you had stayed in that destructive zone, it would have sounded more of like, you promised this, you can't get off the hook with this. How dare you? You're going to disappoint them all. You're going to let them down. You know what that feels like. Yeah, you would be an awful person if you did this. That's the destructive communication we tell ourselves that make us kind of suck it up, buttercup, and push through.
Mhm.
And nobody wants that. We're doing nobody any favors by doing that. So,
No,
yeah,
no.
well
And I
done.
thank you. Thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And yeah, I mean my family would have been affected by
Yeah,
that. My health would have been affected by that. Just so
yeah.
many different aspects. And so yeah, just
Oh,
grace. Grace, grace,
grace.
grace.
Yeah.
Blanket yourself in grace.
Yes. Well, as we wrap up, what is some encouragement you want to offer our listeners that are taking this in and absorbing it and understanding that gray space is a way to live? What would be some encouragement you want to offer them?
Yeah, I think there's 7 different practices to
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think if you're like me, an overachiever, type A, you're going to want to get them all right now. And I think it's just taking, knowing what they are,
Mm-hmm.
know the overview of them all, but then focusing on one area, whether that's in a
Mm-hmm.
day or a week or a month, and really like those little improvements. There's 52 weeks in a year. So if you just,
Mm-hmm.
did it, one a week and you just did it over and over again, there would be a ton of improvement by the end of the year and
Mm-hmm.
just reducing that stress, giving yourself
Mm-hmm.
grace to do grace space and help grow through these because
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna you're gonna just not be perfect at it and
Yeah.
that's okay. It's a practice like you said. So
Mm-hmm.
just continue to practice it and
Mm-hmm.
each day you will grow in more grace for yourself and
Mm-hmm.
for others and then just a year from now there'll be so much beauty that comes
Mm-hmm.
from that and you'll see it in your professional life, you'll see it in your
Mm-hmm.
personal life and you'll just see it with you internally too.
Yeah. I love that you said that. And it made me think of this in our working relationship and our friendship. You'll start attracting that. I think we
Hmm.
instinctively knew, hey, we're people of grace. Make no mistake, we're achievers. We get the job done, but it's not going to cost you our relationship and our
Hmm.
connectedness. And, as we worked together and got to know each other, I just instinctively felt we could do oopsies and say, oops, I thought this, or wait, oh, wait a minute, can we talk about this? And there was just always grace there. And I think that's encouragement too. I would tell people when you offer it, you're going to attract it. You're going to
Yeah.
have a huge community around you. And because this is an intentional way of living and the way that I like to actually talk about it, the people in my life are so rich. I mean, they know exactly who you are and what you're offering. And those are the people that want to stay. The people that don't want it aren't staying. The
Mhm.
people that want defensiveness or other stuff or accusation or destructive language, they're not interested in grace space. But when you actually intentionally and proactively lead out of this and live out of this, man, the community that starts growing around you becomes very rich and robust in their personal life and in your professional life.
And I think it's a real community because you and I,
Yeah.
Heather, we actually had like a big oopsie when we were working with each other that
I wasn't sure if
could
I
have.
could bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah. No. We don't have to talk about it, but we
Yeah.
did. We had
Yeah.
something that could have caused a big issue between the
Yeah.
two of us. And if we were operating in like a non-grace space
Uh-huh.
environment, it could have been a big issue.
Yes.
But it
Yes.
wasn't. And it actually
Yeah.
strengthened our bond with each other.
Yep.
And I have so much respect for you now. And I think
Hmm.
you feel the same way about
Totally.
me. And I would always recommend people to work with
Yes.
you and connect with you
Yeah.
because we were able to work through what it was and come to a common ground and an
Right.
understanding and respect for one
Hmm.
another through something
Hmm.
that could have been really ugly if we didn't
Oh,
have
yeah.
this
Yeah.
approach and the mindset. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of times
Yeah.
when people look at the world and they're like,
Hmm.
that ego is involved and they're so defensive and like, you're
Yeah.
not going to get to me. Like you're going to create this false sense of community
Hmm.
and relationships when really like, if you can do the hard stuff with each other and still have respect and this
Hmm.
grace space with one another,
Hmm.
like that's where it really is. That's where the real bonds are. That's where the true relationships are, is if you can navigate the tough stuff by using these different practices.
I so agree. Yeah. In fact, just for our listeners, I'll mention it. You know, Erica gave me these amazing services and I totally misunderstood it, signed the contract, was super happy about it, didn't quite understand the fine print. And then she starts moving forward and activating. I'm like, what? What's this? Huh? What's this? And I could feel as we think about the constructive versus destructive, I could feel the destructive shame starting to come on me. You
Mm.
blew it, you messed up, you're going to hurt this working relationship. You signed a contract, she won't let you out of it, you know. And I remember going, you know what little I know about Erica, I think I'll just come clean and say, I'm so sorry, I missed it and I misunderstood this. Can you help me get out of this and figure this out? And I think, again, letting myself have grace toward myself was so important. Then saying it out loud in a way that was not shaming you or shaming me. It was like, oops, I'm so sorry. I missed something here. And your response was so quick to just jump in and say, not a problem. I can understand how this is missed. Here's how we'll pivot. And I thought, you're right. Now my respect level was here just because you were new, and it went to a 10, went from a 7 to a 10. And I was like, I will always feel an ease with partnering with her because she lets me have oopsies. I'm going to let her have oopsies, and we're going to fully own it. Part of that grace space is still fully taking responsibility for where we took a wrong turn and owning it and saying, I took a wrong turn here. I misunderstood something. Can you help me get out of this conundrum that I got myself into? And letting ourselves have that grace-filled conversation. I think that it only makes relationships stronger, and it's built then on grace, not fear, intimidation, or these other things that really break down a relationship that honestly you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I so appreciated the way you
Yeah.
approached it. Because, on my end, there were things too, like, oh my gosh, did I not communicate this right? And I
Mhm.
will say we were communicating fabulously. We were just like on parallel levels. Like we weren't on the same level. We were
Yeah.
communicating. Like if somebody was listening to our conversations, they would be like, where did the miscommunication go? You guys were
We
like
were amazing
totally, you were
in our own
amazing at
reality.
communication in our own reality, in our own level, just plain
Yeah.
side, one on
Yeah.
top of the other, just not actually on that same path.
Yeah.
And so, I had to take responsibility too for
Mhm.
where the miscommunication may have been. And so we each owned up to
Yeah.
our areas of miscommunication and worked together to get
Right.
something that I think was really beneficial for both of us. And
Right.
I just knowing the world, especially in the marketing communications world and the
Mm-hmm.
agency world, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing clients and clients that friends have worked on before, like that could
Mm-hmm.
have been a really ugly situation
It could have. Yeah.
on both ends.
Both ends.
Either
Yeah.
one of us could
Yeah.
have, had some anger and animosity, and
Right.
things could have gotten dicey. But what what an awesome moment that we were working
Yeah.
on Gray Space and we're
Wasn't
able
it?
to really like use those practices as we navigated that tough situation. And it wasn't even tough, honestly. It was
No.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It
And
was like, it
confusing.
was
Yeah.
uncomfortable and
Mm-hmm.
confusing. We're like, wait,
Yeah.
where did this go?
Right.
Where did it go awry?
Right.
I still
Yes.
don't even know, Heather, but we made it work.
I don't even, and I don't care because
No.
again, the situation, the emphasis, and I guess is what I want people to hear. Our
Yeah.
emphasis was not on justice and fairness.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the practice connection versus protection. You weren't trying to protect your rights.
Mm-mm.
I wasn't trying to protect my rights. We shifted and pivoted away from any of that and said, no, I'm choosing connection.
Yeah.
You're choosing connection. And so then it got to be a real strong collective clarity of how we remedy this situation for a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like either one of us took the loss. I think we both said, oh, here's what I'll need. Okay, here's what I need, because we were so caring of that connection versus the protection. And I've worked with people where all of a sudden they're just protecting their contract, their services, their reality of what happened. And now the battle's on because
Mm-hmm.
it's shifted away from a sense of connecting with the other human in front of you to a commitment of win-win. And it's moved into this hierarchy where, well, only one's going to win out of this. And I either have to take them on or walk away. It's now just a very limited option versus when our focus is on connection. You talk about gray space. Neither of us were focused on protecting. We were focused on connecting. And I think that's a really important practice in gray space that will help us not only be kinder, but be more intelligent for how we can get to these win-win spaces. Neither one of us wants to see anyone lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the epitome of gray space. Nor are we willing to take the whole loss. We are saying, wait a minute, we care about whoever is in this situation enough to say, how do we connect and how do we get to a result that makes everybody happy?
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for being on my show today and just talking with me. And it took all these twists and turns that I didn't think it was going to take, but I had so much fun. Following it.
Yeah, me too. I love it. That's the way it works. You get the two of us together, we're going places.
That's for sure, man. Well, thank you, everyone. We are cheering you on. Eric and I love just seeing you all succeed. And I know that's what she does in her work. And Erica, where can they find you if they want to work with you and employ you with your services?
Sure. I don't know if you can hear, but we're having a major thunderstorm above me.
We can't hear anything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you can connect with me at faithandgather.com. And that has all the different things that are going on. Like I said, I'm in a transition period. So that will be like that fail safe that is like right there. You know exactly what I am offering at that time. You can find me on all of the social media platforms at Faith and Gather. So it's Faith and then AND Gather. And yeah, like I said, just do the website. I think the best way to really get at the heart of what I do and the mission behind Faith and Gather is by joining the email list. And so when you hop on line and you go to faithandgather.com, there should be a box that pops up and you can go ahead and sign up there. That is really where you get all of me and Erica and my honesty, vulnerability, and just what is happening with Faith and Gather. So would love to have you a part of the community.
Perfect. Thank you. I am a part of that community. I get to see that. And it's great to see what your authentic voice out in that world. And so, I'm cheering you on and I'm behind you 100% too.
Thank you. Same here. Same here.
Well, thank you so much, friends. We are cheering you on and we thank you for joining us in Gray Space. I know it's so intuitive and I just can't wait to hear more and more stories of how you are modeling that and how you are inviting people to join you in it. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We had such a great time today, and obviously we are all stepping into this life that we're made for, but isn't it nice to have a little bit of support along the way? If you want to find out more about the life that you're made for, come find me at heatherpenny.com. Go ahead and subscribe, give us a review. That really helps us out and helps spread the word. You get to step into the life that you're made for. Cheering you on.